Well, good morning, and my name is Willie Lawson, and this is the Morning Report. Immigration has become one of the most emotionally charged issues in American politics. But that emotion often obscures something far more important: motive. Because for years, Americans have been told that opposition to immigration law enforcement is about compassion, it's about tolerance or humanitarian concern. But when you examine the behavior, not the rhetoric, of the modern political left, a different picture emerges. This is not a debate over paperwork or border procedures. This is a struggle over political power, ideological worldview, and narrative control. And that's why enforcement of immigration law, laws passed by Congress, laws signed by presidents, and laws that have been upheld by courts face such a fierce resistance from the left, even when enforcement is measured, targeted, or even supported by the public. So, to understand what's really going on, we must stop asking what they say, because who cares what they say, and start asking what they have to gain. The first and most obvious reason the left opposes immigration law enforcement, of course, is political power. Immigration is not merely a policy issue for the modern left. No, 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 no. It's a demographic strategy. Population matters in American politics because it determines congressional representation, electoral college votes, redistricting outcomes, and of course, the flow of federal dollars. Crucially, the census every 10 years counts everybody, not just citizens, which is something that we must address. That means large non-citizen populations can shift political power even before a single vote is cast. States with cities with high levels of illegal immigration gain seats in Congress. They influence national elections and increase their share of federal funding. States that enforce immigration laws or lose population to migration lose that power. This creates a powerful incentive structure. Enforcement threatens political clout. And over time, this strategy compounds. Amnesty campaigns, expanded asylum definitions, relaxed enforcement priorities, and birthright citizenship ensure that today's undocumented population becomes tomorrow's voting bloc, or at least the foundation of one. Advocacy groups aligned with the left understand this very well. They don't need immediate voting rights to benefit. What they need is permanence, growth, and institutional support. That's why enforcement is framed as an existential threat. Deportation is not just removal, it's subtraction. Because fewer people mean less leverage, fewer districts, and less influence. That reality explains why sanctuary policies persist even when they increase crime, even when they strain local budgets, and even if they defy federal authority. Because from this perspective, immigration enforcement is not a neutral administrative act. It's a political resistance to a long-term project. And projects that generate power are never surrendered voluntarily. All right. You got me? You got me? Are we tracking? Are we tracking? Good. The second reason the left opposes immigration law enforcement runs deeper than even politics. It's ideological. There is a growing segment of the left that does not simply disagree with how immigration laws are enforced. They reject the entire idea that borders themselves have moral legitimacy. And this worldview, national borders are seen as arbitrary lines drawn by history and often associated with, here's the word, colonialism, inequality, or exclusion. Sovereignty is treated not as a necessary condition for democracy, but as an obstacle to global justice. And once borders are viewed like that, enforcement becomes inherently immoral, no matter how humane, legal, or restrained it may be. There is no version of enforcement that satisfies that framework because the premise itself is already rejected. This explains why enforcement agencies are demonized regardless of their conduct. Immigration officers are not judged by behavior or outcomes, but by their very existence. They are portrayed as agents of cruelty, simply enforcing the law. Language is carefully chosen. Raids, roundups, families torn apart. The goal is not reform, but delegitimization. This ideological stance also explains the contradiction at heart of the left-wing immigration rhetoric. The same political movement that demands strict enforcement of environmental regulations, speech norms, tax laws, and public health mandates suddenly becomes libertarian when it comes to immigration law. That inconsistency is not accidental. It reflects selective morality driven by ideology, not principle. So, in this framework, the nation state itself becomes suspect. Citizenship is treated as exclusionary. Equal application of the law is replaced by a moral triage. The result is not compassion. The result is disorder masquerading as virtue. All right. The third reason that the left opposes immigration law enforcement is control of the narrative. If you've been watching or listening to me for a while, my first real interview was with Andrew Breitbart when I had a weekend show on WGUL 860 here in Tampa. And what he said to me in that interview was startling. That he said that whoever controls the narrative controls the whole thing, which is why it's important that those of us on the right take over the narrative and not just react to it. And immigration is uniquely suited for emotional storytelling. Images of children and families and desperate journeys are very powerful. And the left has invested heavily in framing enforcement exclusively through this lens. Every deportation is portrayed as cruelty. Every detention is framed as abuse. Every enforcement action is reduced to a single emotional moment, stripped of the context. What is almost never shown are the consequences of non-enforcement. What we don't see is the wage suppression forced by working class Americans when illegal labor floods the market. We don't see that. We don't see the overcrowded classrooms where teachers struggle to teach students who don't speak English. You don't see the housing shortages worsened by unchecked population growth. You don't see the hospitals absorbing uncompensated care or the local governments raising taxes to cover the costs. Most importantly, you don't see the legal immigrants, all the folks who follow the rules, who are effectively told that compliance was stupid and foolish. A rules-based system forces trade-offs into the open. It requires acknowledging limits, that there are limited resources. There's limited housing. There's limited public services. Emotion-driven narratives collapse when confronted with these realities. Enforcement shatters the illusion that compassion is cost-free. That is why enforcement must be opposed at all costs. It introduces facts. It introduces consequences. And consequences always complicate stories. All right. One of the most persistent claims from the left that opposing enforcement is humane. But history shows exactly the opposite. When enforcement is weak or inconsistent, it creates incentives for dangerous behavior. People are encouraged to make perilous journeys. Smuggling networks thrive. Children are trafficked. Women are assaulted. Entire communities are destabilized by transient populations with no legal footing. Strong, predictable enforcement reduces chaos. It discourages exploitation. It restores clarity. The most humane system is not one with the fewest rules. It's the one with the clear, consistently applied rules that do not reward lawbreaking. The left's approach replaces structure with sentiment. But sentiment cannot govern a nation. And it's really, folks, it's not the wealthy progressives who bear the cost of non-enforcement, because it never is. It's never the people at the who are getting awards at the Grammys, because the things that happen, the consequences never happen in their neighborhood. Billie Eilish will never have to worry about, people, the indigenous folks deciding that, her house is on sacred land and she should give it up. It's just super easy to say, but you never have to suffer any consequences. Because it's the tradesmen competing with the under the table labor. It's the renter priced out of housing. We know what housing is, right? It's the parent whose child's classroom is overcrowded. It's the taxpayers funding emergency services that are stretched beyond capacity. Opposition to enforcement is sold as compassion for the vulnerable, but it often results in harm to those with the least political voice. And this is not accidental. It's a feature of policies shaped by ideology and power rather than accountability. Let's close it up today. The left's opposition to immigration law enforcement is not rooted in ignorance of the law. We have to stop thinking these people are stupid. We have to stop thinking these people don't know the law, because they do. It's not about misunderstanding. They completely get it's not misunderstanding the consequences. And it's not even primarily about compassion, because it's never about compassion. It's always about the same things. It's about power. Demographic, political, and institutional. It's about ideology, a rejection of borders and sovereignty. And it's about narrative control, maintaining moral authority by suppressing inconvenient facts. So once you see these three incentives clearly, the behavior makes sense. Because enforcement threatens all three. That's why resistance is relentless, and it's emotional, and it's uncompromising. Immigration law enforcement is not radical. It is the baseline requirement for a sovereign nation. It's the least that can happen. And no society can survive indefinitely without enforcing the rules that define its membership: responsibility and belonging. My name is Willie Lawson. This has been the Morning Report. The Morning Report is a production of fightbackmedia.com, fightbackmedia.com, fightbackmedia.com. And until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye-bye now.